And what do these sanctions signal for U.S.-Chinese relations going forward?
Well, I think at the very least it signals for now that President Trump himself isn't finished when it comes to dealing with China before he leaves office. And obviously it's going to make it more difficult for President Biden to unwind some of these measures when he takes over. These particular sanctions are after the recent disqualification of some legislators from the Hong Kong LegCo here. More details are expected to come out from Washington overnight, but I think the bigger focus for markets and indeed the economy will be whether they signal even bigger sanctions are underway and whether the U.S. targets banks, for example.
Right, so it might not just be Chinese officials, it can move to banks and others, and you see it jittery in the markets this morning. And we also had Chinese trade data out this morning, which beat expectations. I mean, huge what we saw. What's behind this massive jump in exports?
Well, it's a bumper number. I mean, the expectation going into the export figures were that there might be some tapering off heading into the year end, but in fact we're seeing the opposite. The early take on it seems to be that there's still very strong demand for the kind of goods that China is very good at making, the personal protection equipment for the health sector, given that the virus continues to surge in Europe and the US, and of course all of the work from home technology that everyone still needs, the laptops and everything else. So that seems to be feeding into some of that demand. The question is how long can it last? There's an argument among economists that perhaps as the global economic recovery slows because of what's happening in the US and Europe with the virus, that in turn will eventually feed through to slowing down demand for China's own export. So right now it's a bumper figure. It sets up China to end the year on a strong note. The question is how long that can last heading into the new year.
Yeah, that's the question I ask a lot of guests, Manus and I, on this program. How much is this Chinese exceptionalism? How much can it actually last if the rest of the world is still falling behind? China was first in and first out when it came to the pandemic. And how reliant is China on the West getting itself together in terms of controlling the virus?
Well, look, there's no doubt that the manufacturing and export story has been an important leg of China's own recovery, but public spending has still been a big part of it too, it should be said. A lot of investment is still state-led, and that's been one of the key legs in the China's economic recovery stool. And of course, domestic consumption is also doing quite well. It took a while to get going, despite the fact that the virus has been under control for some months now, but it is moving. So you have consumption, you have investment, and you have this export story, which is likely to hold up at least in the near term. There's a mixture of year-end demand. As you mentioned, there's the ongoing virus surge in Europe and the US, which will drive demand for PPE kit and the work-from-home kit and everything else. So there's still some legs in this. It's a question of how long it can last once we turn the corner into the new year.